YouTube, how the heck you doing? This is Corey here with Watcher of Realms. Now, this is going to be a video that I'm going to go and do in relation to the video that Fastidious actually dropped a little bit earlier today. Now, one of the things that he mentioned, and I want to just kind of quickly go through in a summative format if you haven't watched this video. First and foremost, Abyss 1 is way too difficult. Second thing is we do need the release of a different form of gear, whether that be helmets or something additional, like a new gear raid, to go ahead and provide that so we can go ahead and scale into the actual new end game, which is Abyss 1. And then finally, the other thing is the issue in some regard, right, to the necessitation of these limited heroes. He even mentioned whenever he goes ahead and has a chance, if there's a new Kigiri banner, he's going to pull for it, right? So I wanted to just go through Abyss 1 and just highlight some of the issues with it, and then also give my own opinions as to the progression and how the game should progress moving forward. So first and foremost, just for context, right? In Eternals, we're top 10, at least in terms of BP, and we're still missing a player, right? So we pretty much have every single hero decently awakened in this guild particularly. So let's go through it, right? So if we're going to go ahead and look at the world rankings, right now, Abyss 1, the max chest is at 60k. The max that we have so far is a 44k run from this person. And then also we have Fabu also doing a 43k, almost 44k run. Now, one of the things that I want to go ahead and very, very quickly just make clear, we are looking at A5 Kigiri, A5 Wukong, A4 Solkadins. Pause. Limited hero in Wukong, limited hero in Kigiri. Also, if we're to look at Fabu, right? Similar thing. A5 Kigiri, A5 Wukong, A5 Lust, A4 Solkadins. The issue primarily with this is one, to go ahead and even remotely get close to the max chest, there is a very high need for A5 units. And specifically, you're needing A5 limited. One thing is, Lust isn't as bad as a A5 because we've had two banners for her in particular. However, Wukong and Kigiri, we have recently had a release. So it's not likely that we're going to go ahead and get a rerun for those banners. In fact, I believe we've only had 3 limiteds that have been reran. That is Reeve, Lust, and who else? Falsia. I believe those are the 3 reruns that we've had. Now, obviously, gacha games are going to go ahead and do this, right? There's a need to go ahead and obviously scale up the content difficulty, but one of the critical issues is we just got this, which is fine. We're going to go ahead and develop new strategies to go ahead and beat this. However, as it currently stands, the likelihood of us being able to, anybody for that matter, being able to get to the max chest requires A5 limiteds. And secondly, right, if we're to go through this, we're at number 1. Let's just go through and see who's number 100 for that matter. 100 is 21k. To be top 100 in the world for this game, for this specific boss, you're going to need A5 Wukong, Solkadins. So this team isn't super stacked, but they also have a Diao Chan, right? So you're looking at some limited hero having to be A5 or just having a very, very good set of gear just to get to 21k. So we do need the introduction of a new gear piece. Now, typically if you go ahead and play gacha games, you'll notice a couple of things. When you go through the gear, let's just go ahead and go to my roster super quick here. There we go. You have, at least in this particular game, we have 5 pieces in totality, and then we have the artifact. It is not uncommon for games to actually go ahead and have 6, 9 pieces. In fact, there's a couple games that will go ahead and give you a helmet, weapon, this, 3 items down here, and then 3 over here, just so you have a substantial amount of stats to go ahead and deal with the endgame content. Now, one of the things that we should have is the introduction of a new gear raid, which Fastidious does mention, and I actually think it's a fantastic idea. Reason being is because we're going to get to a point where, for example, this is Abyss 1. Just it being named Abyss 1 indicates that we're going to have an Abyss 2, right? And just like how we have Semra, which is APOC 1 and APOC 2, it's likely for us to go and have an APOC 3. So as it stands, we're in a very dangerous position, right? So either the next limited hero that releases is going to be critically valuable and very, very strong, which raises a substantial amount of issues if moving forward the only way to go ahead and have a good success in boss content is to go ahead and pull these limited heroes that are specifically made for this. Also, in a sense, you are kind of limited in how often you're able to go ahead and get these heroes because they are limited, which means soul stones are very, very, very valuable. And one of the things that is an underlying current with all of this is the fact that we get a soul stone, let's say like every 3 months, which is very, very generous. However, the concern is if we are only able to progress in boss content because Moonton goes ahead and gives us stones, which we are then forced to go ahead and utilize on the limited heroes, it essentially negates the purpose of the Soul Stone. The Soul Stone is no longer a choice as to, oh, I want to go ahead and A for my Uridan. It's now, oh, I got this Soul Stone, I went ahead and spent 1,000 summons on Diao Chan, didn't get her A1, now I need to go ahead and invest a Soul Stone in Diao Chan just to continue to essentially have a chance at playing the other game modes that are being introduced. So what we need is the introduction of a new gear raid. It's just, as it stands, that is a necessity at this point. And in the second verse, in a similar strain alongside all this, there needs to be a reevaluation as to the strength of what limited heroes are and what they're essentially supposed to do. Now, the reason why I say this is because whenever Lust was released, this is kind of where we started seeing the introduction of these units that are kind of changing the meta as limiteds. Specifically, Lust went ahead and changed the progress for Guild Boss 1 because she was a Nightmare unit. She accelerated Arrogance and all these other units that were very, very common for Guild Boss 1, specifically Nightmare 4 and Nightmare 3. Now, with the introduction of these new limiteds, such as Wukong, Wukong, Kigiri, and Diao Chan, we're in a very dangerous precedent because they're no longer in the similar vein as to Dahlia, where Dahlia performs a overall function. Now we have limiteds that are essentially mandatory to go ahead and do not even endgame content, because now you kind of need Kigiri to go ahead and do APOC 1 or 2, depending on what you're using them for. You need Wukong to have a decent chance of doing APOC 1 or 2, or even Guild Boss for that matter. You can still use any other unit for Guild Boss 1, but at this point, we're starting to have a upwards trajectory as to you need to save for the limiteds to go ahead and play the game. That's an issue. And then thirdly, right, as it stands, gear is good, right? The gear is in a good spot. However, with the tier 2 sets being vastly superior to the tier 3 sets, we're no longer in a situation where we have a further path of growing our units, right? We're basically still hard capped at what can Gear Raid 3 do? What can you go ahead and get from your tier 2 sets, your Inferno Roars, your Soulbound Arcana, even Ageless Wrath, which is the immediate set. So whenever the game first came out, and Fastidious mentions this, but it's a well-known thing, Gear Raid 3 was the newest Gear Raid, right? Gear Raid 1 and 2 were the first two that were released. So as it stands, we haven't had any sets that have drastically gone ahead and increased the strength of our units. However, we have been having content that has been increasing in difficulty. The introduction of the exclusives is meant to go ahead and progress our units. However, when you really look at the damage provided from the exclusive weapons, the exclusive artifacts for that example, I actually just went ahead and pulled, let's see here, this. I actually just went ahead and pulled the Sentinel's Eye for Yovar. Now, it's a fantastic piece, but it's not going to go ahead and make my Yovar go from 8 out of 10 to Praetus level, right? It's not going to do that. And in addition to that, the exclusive gear is very rare, especially when it comes to getting good rolls for it. So as it stands, we do need something to go ahead and kind of act as a scaffold to get accounts to a position where they're able to go ahead and beat some of this content, or at least play the content. Now, one of the things that's also very important to note, because I'm a huge Guild v Guild guy, is one of the main things I care about with this game. It shouldn't necessarily influence how Guild v Guild functions, because as long as there are no additional set effects, like, oh, there's a chance to go ahead and stun X units, or there's a chance to go ahead and freeze X unit, Guild v Guild for the most part should remain the same. You're scaling up the damage, but you're scaling up the BP off the units that you're affiliating. So it should for the most part remain at parity. So if that's a concern, it really shouldn't be. The main things is we do need some more gear in this game, or tier 3 gear needs to actually feel like tier 3 gear. I do think Moonton does a great job of, balancing the game and doing some things with the game. However, there are some things that indicate that their prioritization of certain stats or certain mechanics seems to be severely lacking in comparison to what actually is valuable to a majority of the player base. And also, just to kind of summarize a couple of things. I'm not advocating that every single content needs to be accessible and doable within the first month. No, that would be a little bit ridiculous. However, when you're looking at players that have A5 everything for limiteds nonetheless, and they're not able to hit the maximum reward, it indicates that something is a little bit awry. It means that a new unit is going to be released, and that's going to break the game. Or it means that there wasn't necessarily a plan to go ahead and scale things up. You created the problem first without already having the solution in mind. And that's the concern, right? Because as it stands, Cataclysm, Hell's Lament, what's the other set? Is there another set? Or tier 3? Cataclysm, Hell's Lament don't do anything better or superior than Soulbound Arcana or Infernal Roar. So unless there's some major changes to how these two sets function that make them feel like tier 3 gear, introduce a third piece of gear, like a new gear rate or something. Or do both. It doesn't influence the player. Like if they're like a new player, right? And they go ahead and do gear rate 1, 2, 3. Let's say they're able to go ahead and get the gear, and Fastidious mentions this, 80k Semra. Okay, then they go ahead and get access to a new gear raid or something that allows them to get new gear. That's fine, right? They've gone ahead and progressed the game to a decent position that insinuates or implies that they have the ability to go ahead and do new content to further progress. It is not a horrible idea for Semra to be, okay, yeah, you can go ahead and get 120k. That's not too difficult. You still need some good units to go ahead and achieve that. But now you have the ability to farm this new piece of gear to kind of push you to that 120. The issue right now that Watcher of Realms is facing is you don't need gear nearly as much as you need awakenings. And until Watcher of Realms Moonton just addresses the importance of awakenings versus gear for scaling, this game is going to have a very critical problem in the long-term future. Now, it is known, right, that Moonton is going to go ahead and release a tower. We don't know when it's going to happen, but it's implied that they're going to go ahead and do that from the dev interview that they did. I think it was December. It's very possible for them to go ahead, and I would probably advocate for this, release a new piece of gear alongside that, right? And let that be a way to go ahead and receive some gear. As you go through the tower, you get specific shards, fragments, or whatever to go ahead and get gear. Or just release a new gear raid in its entirety. But as it stands, 5 pieces of gear plus an artifact is just not cutting it for the scaling, and something does need to change, because if you're banking on a soulstone to go use on a limited to go ahead and play a piece of content, the new player is never going to get the ability to even play the content. They're going to quit before they even go ahead and get to Abyss 1. Because in their head, they're going to think, okay, so I need A5 Wukong. I missed Wukong's banner. I just started playing the game. I need A5 Kigiri. I missed Kigiri's banner. I just started playing the game. I need A1 Daochan. I only had 200 summons by the time I was able to start getting to a decent position in the game so that I could go ahead and summon for her. So I got one copy, but now I need a soul stone, but I still need this soul stone for Kigiri or Wukong. You're creating such a massive problem by not introducing new gear. Moonton, just take a second. Think about it. Consider the release of a new piece of gear raid or something to elevate the status of tier 3 gear or something that makes it more appealing to the player base so that they can go ahead and do content. And I'm not saying that everyone should go ahead and max Abyss 1 right now. I'm not saying everyone should be able to max Abyss 1 in the next 2 weeks, next month, next 3 months. However, some people should be able to. And they should be able to without having to spend thousands of summons or hundreds to thousands of dollars in order to do it when they have already spent thousands just to get to 40K. See ya.